Hey everybody, welcome to something pretty special. I am sitting with my friend Jaime in a Mercedes EQS. This is the new fully electric Mercedes sedan slash hatchback, and in this video we are going to take it for a drive, talk about what it's like to experience the electric EQS, talk about the pros, the cons, the price, and the availability, and whether or not you should buy one. So let me go ahead, turn the ignition on, of course completely silent, and then we're gonna merge onto this highway heading to Santa Cruz, California, into gear, no one coming, and full throttle. And there goes the power. Right about 25 miles an hour is when you get the wave of instant torque. Now the EQS is available in two configurations. There is the 450 Plus and the 580. The one we are in here today is the 450 Plus. So this is powered by a rear-mounted electric motor over 300 horsepower. Mercedes says 0 to 60 in the mid 5-second range, and that goes down to a top speed of 130. And let's go ahead and give it a squirt at speed. Yeah, it's pretty adequate, but straight line performance is not what the Mercedes EQS is all about. What this vehicle represents, what it is supposed to embody, is the ultimate in quiet and serene Mercedes luxury, and for that, it is just exquisite. I don't think I have driven a car in recent months that is this quiet, this serene, this isolated from the outside world. If I didn't tell you what you were in, you might go as far as to say you were in like a 1960s Mercedes or 1970s Mercedes, because it is not sporty. Nothing about this car wants to go quickly. It just wants to cruise in utter peace and serenity for hundreds of miles at a time, and that is pretty fantastic. Now this does ride on standard air suspension, and there are different drive modes, but I almost feel like this car doesn't need the drive modes. It just needs one mode, Mercedes mode. Because yes, you can dial it into sports and, you know, throw it around the turns, and it will do it, but what it's really good at is just cruising at 50, 60 miles an hour for ages in absolute quietness. So this is pretty cool. I mean, I haven't been in a Mercedes in recent years even that drives like this, because it isn't trying to be sporty in the least, and I love that. This car also has standard 4-wheel steering, so the rear wheels will help you navigate around tight turns, which is great in the city. It's pretty dramatic, up to 10 degrees of rear wheel steer. It is a little bit alarming at first, like you do want to pay attention to your surroundings, especially with the rear wheels, because it is pretty easy to get a little caught off guard on what the rear end of the car is doing, and you wouldn't want to slam your beautiful 21-inch wheels into a curb. Now the steering is beautifully weighted, not too heavy, not too light. It's not over boosted like a 1960s American car, but it's perfectly responsive and does a good job right off center. So let's talk about the pricing. The 450, the one we're in right now, rear wheel drive starts at about $102. The 580 starts at about $119,000. Now the 580 comes standard with something they call the Hyperscreen, which is 56 inches of usable screen space. It is absurd. Now, from the driver's side to the passenger side, we have one continuous pane of curved glass, not interrupted by seams or divisions or anything. It's one giant piece of glass, and within that glass are 3 separate screens. So in front of me is a 12.8-inch display, the cluster screen. In the middle is nearly 18 inches of MBUX display, and then Jaime over there in the passenger seat has his own display, which is completely configurable and can be used exactly like the middle screen. So it's another version of MBUX. You can control the radio, the media. It even has its own navigation processor. So separate processors between the two screens. So for example, Jaime could queue up Starbucks near me while I am navigating to Santa Cruz, and then he'd just send it to the main screen and I'd have it here and I know exactly where to go. So that is one of my favorite parts. The other cool thing about this system is being an electric car. If you want to go on a road trip, you obviously need to know where to charge and for how long to charge, and the Mercedes will do all the thinking for you. So I could plug in Miami into the infotainment screen, and it will tell me to stop here, here, and here for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however it may be. And then, you know, it's just thoughtless. It's all done via the car. And speaking of charging, This car has a 107.8 kilowatt hour battery. Mercedes says 0 to 80% in 31 minutes at a max charge rate of 200 kilowatts, but they made it very clear to me in the presentation yesterday that they weren't chasing the highest possible charge peak rate. So it's a 400 volt system. It's not 800 volts like the Porsche Taycan, but what they were going for is a large amount of sustained high current. So maybe not all the way up at 200, but they want to keep that average from 0 to 80% above 160 kilowatts. So they said it's a very usable charging curve. And when we get this vehicle back to our home base in Colorado, we'll run through all the charging tests and see if that is really true. So EPA estimated range, 350 miles on a single charge for the rear-wheel drive EQS, 340 miles on a single charge for the all-wheel drive EQS. How does that compare to the competitive set? Well, vehicles like the Model S are EPA rated at over 400, which is more. Now we've got the Lucid, right, which is this new startup. They're saying over 500 miles on a single charge. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the Taycan, which is more in the mid 200 mile range. I think personally 340 miles is plenty for most folks. I think that most people buying this car are probably going to have access to a garage and probably going to have access to a 240 volt level 2 home outlet where they can charge it up from empty to full overnight, which Mercedes says takes just over 11 hours to fill this vehicle up on a level 2 charger. So I don't think you realistically need more than 340 miles for the vast majority of consumers buying this car. So some other cool technology, of course, it does have a full suite of safety gear, including lane centering, and this one also has automatic lane changes. So I can set the cruise control, I can set the lane centering, turn on the turn signal, and it will go left and right when there's obviously not a car in the way, and allow me to make those lane maneuvers. Very good for road trips, and I think that is where this car really shines, is just the absolute serenity that you get on long distance driving. We are cruising along here in the mountains of California at 60-65 miles an hour. I mean, nothing. It's just silent, almost uncomfortably silent. So some other interesting technical bits. The maximum regenerative or recuperation rate is 290 kilowatts on the all-wheel drive model, about 186 on the rear-wheel drive model, and you can control the recuperation with the paddles on the steering wheel. So if I pull the left paddle, I basically have 1 foot of driving. So I lift off the throttle, the nose dives, and we slow down. Pull the right paddle, I can go to normal, or no, which is basically just coasting. And then I use the brakes as a blended braking system to drive energy back into the pack, regardless of whether or not you're on 1 foot of driving or not. So the pros of the brakes, they are extremely effective. Obviously 4-wheel discs. They are a little kind of mushy right off of the rest position, and then lots of confidence. I think in a lot of reviews of this car, you're probably going to see a lot of discussion of the brakes. They are a little funky, and they are a little bit weird to get used to, but I think after a day or two of driving this vehicle, you're going to pick it up like that, and you're just not even going to think of it. So other cons of the EQS, not super sure I like the styling. They wanted to go for this one-line approach, they were telling us, where it's one single belt line from the front all the way to the back, and that gives this car an incredible drag coefficient of 0.20, which is what they claim to be a world record. Very cool. However, I'm not sure it works because there's just no division between the hood and the actual greenhouse, and it almost looks like a computer mouse. And they basically said the design philosophy was, if you can subtract the line and still have it look good, do that. So there's no weird intersecting lines or angles or anything. It's just very clean, very round, a little weird. I do like the full LED in the front, that bar in the front. I do like the bar in the back, and that same design motive is continued on the inside with the LED lighting that extends around the cockpit area. Overall, super well made. I think that if this is the direction Mercedes is going in, we are going to be in for some very comfortable and quiet rides going forward. And I love that they just basically threw the rule book out the window and said, you know what, screw it, we're not going to make this a canyon carver. It's going to be big, it's going to be heavy, but it's going to be low, long, wide, and super comfortable. I just love that they finally went in that route. Now we'll have to get this back, like I said, to Colorado to compare it to the Teslas, to compare it to the Porsche Taycan. Availability, they're going to be hitting dealerships very shortly here. This is not based on a standard S-Class. This is an all-new platform called the EVA architecture. None of the interior really feels like the new S-Class. It's very different. Maybe consumers will be a little confused about why there's two, but if you want the ultimate in Mercedes luxury, this might be the answer. No internal combustion engine, no noise, no shifting, just absolute driving bliss. Well guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, check out tflcar.com for the latest and greatest in new car reviews.